Hi, good afternoon. So I'm going to do some stuff with factoring here because that seems to be something that gets a lot of people. Um, and I usually do it a little bit differently than the books tend to tackle this. But the method I use works every single time. And I'm not a big fan of let's learn a trick here and a trick there type thing. Although if you learn enough tricks, there are easier ways to do these. But as I said, I'm not a huge fan of tricks when I can have one method that always kind of works. Okay, so first off, let's start with, let's say 2x squared plus, um, uh, let's say we want to factor this, 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. Okay, so I'm going to use, if you kind of Google and check it out, it's called the AC method. Okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the first term and the last, just the coefficients, and multiply those together. So 2 times negative 5 is equal to negative 10. Now what we want is for the computer to work correctly, but that doesn't always work for me, is what we want is to find two numbers so that way when you multiply them, that equals the same number. But if you add those two numbers, it's going to equal the middle coefficient. So in this case, the 3. Now, I always make a table when I do this, okay? Just because it helps me keep track of things. So I'm going to make a little chart. Okay? And the last column is just going to be the sum, and the first two columns are the factors. So I need to multiply that, remember, to be a negative 10, but it has to add up to be a 3. So keeping track, and I always start at 1 and work my way up. Don't randomly guess stuff, because if you get bigger numbers, it's going to be much more difficult unless you're organized, right? So I start at 1, and I always make my second number negative. Okay? So 1 times negative 10, but that adds up to be a negative 9. So that doesn't work because it's supposed to add to 3. Then we could do 2 times negative 5. That's negative 3, which is close. It's just the wrong sign. Okay? If it's the right number with the wrong sign, that just means the negatives need to be switched. So we can do a negative 2 and a positive 5. You add those up, that gets to be 3. All right, so what you do is you take those two numbers that you find, and you're going to rewrite your middle term as a sum of those two things. So we're going to leave the 2x squared alone, and we're going to have the minus 5 out here. But we're going to take that middle term, and we're going to write that as a minus 2x plus 5x. Notice we're keeping the variable parts exactly the same. If you combine your like terms, you should get your original problem. Now, this is kind of the toughest part of the whole thing, of finding the right numbers. So now, once we've got that split up, we are going to take the first two terms and we're going to factor out the greatest common factor, or the GCF. In this case, it's a 2x. So we're going to factor a 2x out of both of those terms, and what's going to be left over? So remember, when you factor it out, you're really dividing. So 2x squared divided by the 2x would be an x left over there. 2x divided by the 2x would be a negative 1. And then we're going to take the last two terms, and we're going to do the same thing, factor out the greatest common factor of just those. So in this case, 5 is the biggest thing that divides into both, and we're going to try a positive 5. So if I factor the positive 5 out, we're left with an x and a minus 1. Now, please notice what's in parentheses is identical, right? Since they both have a factor of x minus 1, I can factor the x minus 1 out, and then what's left over is the 2x and the plus 5, and that's what goes into the other parentheses. And so now I have my trinomial factored with no guessing and checking stuff. As far as factors go, the only thing we have to kind of guess and check is finding the right two numbers. Now, if you have something. Now, the first thing, that was the simple example. Okay. You always want to check for a greatest common factor first, okay, if you can. So if I look at 4, 28, 72, all of those terms, it looks like everything's divisible by 4. So I would factor that 4 out first. Okay. So let's see. Yeah, so if I factor the 4, that's going to leave me with a w squared plus a 7w plus an 18. Now we need to see if that quadratic will factor as well. So I'm going to use that AC method again. And just because I always get messy with things, I'm going to kind of do that one a little bit separately over here. I'm just going to start off and say, okay, well, w squared plus 7w plus 18. Just going to look at that part. Now this is a 1 times an 18. So that's just 18. So I need to find my two numbers that multiply something times something to be 18, but yet add up to be the 7. So same little chart as the last problem. And we'll start at 1. So 1 and 18. So they both have to have the same sign because they have to multiply to be a positive 18. So if I add those up, I get 19. That's not right. 2 times 9. Oh, I have a sign error. That was supposed to be a minus 18. Be real careful with that. I wrote stuff down wrong, so that's a negative 18. So that should be a negative there. So that would be a negative 17 when I add those up. Let me just erase that. So that should be negative 17. This should be a negative, so that would be a negative 7. And I need a positive 7. So once again, that just tells me I needed a negative 2 and a positive 9. So that's going to give me w squared, minus 2w plus 9w plus 18. So notice I just changed that middle term, and then we do this factor by grouping stuff. So we look at the first two terms. So these first two terms, the biggest thing that divides into those is w. So we factor that out, and we're left with w minus 2. Then we're going to look at the next two terms, and the biggest thing that divides into those is a 9. So that's going to be a w. I didn't fix all of my typo, did I? You should have told me. That'd be that. So w minus 2. And let's see now. So the w minus 2's are the same. So I can factor those out. So notice we got w times this, 9 times that. So that's w minus 2. And then what's left over out of those terms is the w plus 9. So now my final answer then would be 4 times w minus 2 times w plus 9. So one little note of consequence, when you write the two numbers that you find and you rewrite that middle term, it doesn't matter what order you put them in. If written w squared plus 9w minus 2w minus 18, that would be fine. I could factor a w out of the first two terms. Out of the second two terms, and this is where you would want to be careful, I need to factor a negative 2 out. Okay? And remember, when we're dividing, negative 2w divided by negative 2 would be w. Negative 18 divided by negative 2 would be a positive 9. And then we could factor out the w plus 9 and so you get the same thing. So it really doesn't matter what order you write those in. Now, let's see. The last thing is the sum and difference of two cubes. This is one that's just a straight kind of memorization. So this is something where you would have factored something like x cubed plus 27. All right, if I want to factor that, then I'm going to just set up two parentheses, one smaller and one a little bit longer. Okay. Now, this works when both terms are perfect cubes. So you have something times itself 3 times to give you that term. So the first one, x times x times x, right? So that's an x cubed, and the 27 would be 3 cubed, right? So 3 times 3 would be 9, times another 3 would be 27. Okay. So the first set of parentheses, you put the cubed roots in the parentheses. So it's going to be an x and a 3. If it's a sum of 2 cubes, you put a plus sign there. If it's a difference of 2 cubes, you would have a minus. Okay. Now, to get the second set of parentheses, I always look at the first set of parentheses. Okay. So this one, you square this term. So that's going to be an x squared. The second little term in here, you're going to 2 times the product. And that goes in this spot, so that's going to be 6x. Okay? And if it's a sum of 2 cubes, this one's going to be a minus. If it's a difference of 2 cubes, it'll be a plus. And then the last thing that we do is we square the last term. So we square this one as well. And that will be a plus, 3 squared is 9. So now we have it factored. It's x plus 3 times x squared minus 6x plus 9. And it's the same deal with a difference of 2 cubes. Okay. So for a difference of 2 cubes, we might have something like 8y cubed minus 125. So just taking note, the first set of parentheses is the cubed roots. All right, so that's going to be 2y. And since it's a difference of 2 cubes, we're going to have the negative in the first set of parentheses, minus 5. Okay. Now, the second set of parentheses, square the first term. So we square that, so that's going to be 4y squared. Multiply the 2 terms together and double. So 2y times 5 would be 10. Double that would be 20, and this will be a plus 20y. And then we square the last term. So that would be a positive 25. And our factors then are 2y minus 5 times 4y squared plus 20y plus 25. So the difference in sum of 2 cubed stuff is just straight up memorization. Hope this helps.